All right, well, welcome. We're so glad you guys are here with us. So this, give it up for our band one more time. Um, and see Betterman, Claire, Godemont. You guys been this. We get here at 7 a.m. To set this up and get it going. So they have a long morning. It's been a long morning already, but just all the volunteers have been chipped in. I cannot thank everybody enough for everything. So building update real quick. We do this every week. If you want to help, we're gonna do this every week right there at the Cougar sign. Rick and David. I saw Rick because he's a giant. He's somewhere up there. And then David, I saw earlier. They'll be over there if you want to help out in any way or have any questions. They'll be glad to telling you about that. I'm gonna go ahead and say this. Rick's gonna shake his head no, but David is super positive. They have told me that maybe one more weekend here. So maybe one more week at Bullet Central. So we will be at Bullet Central next week for Mother's Day. And then we hope to be back in our building on the 18th. And so, yeah, you can read that around. That's amazing. And I see it tentatively that could change. It will let you know. But so next week for Mother's Day, we want you and your moms to all be here. We are gonna have Mr. T and Tom's out there again. And if you're a mom or a mom to be, we're gonna give you a free coffee or tea of your choice, just for being here. So make sure and bring your moms. Please don't pull up, get a coffee, and then leave. If you get a coffee or a tea, come to the service. That's the deal, okay? But there is so much stuff coming out. We're on the cusp of summer. And so with summer coming up, there's camps. We have camps for elementary, middle school, and then high school is going to CIY. And I know in the midst of all the chaos, it seems like we've forgotten about them. We have not. Like Destin said, there's middle school programming going on this week and next week in the gym. But there's a ton of stuff coming up for elementary, middle, and high school kids. If you have any questions, grab the app or you can see Penny if she's out there in the hallway. But a bunch of stuff coming up as well over the summer. Now we are starting a new series, and so we're just gonna dive right in and kind of look at this. And so we had these shirts that we made that are supposed to be for baptisms, and then the building flooded. So we just ran with it, and so we have just left it in the water. And so there's a staff root text that we had that everybody texts on, and Steven, April, like, hey, we should do a series about this. And I was like, April said it, and I was like, that's a terrible idea. Steven said it, I was like, great idea, Steven. I'm kidding. And so we're going to dive right into it. But in order to be able to start, I have to tell you guys this story. So me and my buddy, we were out west and we were driving down this road and our car stopped. And we were sitting there and we didn't know what we were going to do. And there was this big storm coming. And so we were just sitting there. Now, we were out there in the middle of the storm, but we took some really cool pictures. And so we were out there. We had to wait for hours. And then eventually this tow truck guy came and got our car. And it was I was kidding. That is Johnny Box. So the night people, if you missed it, give it up for Johnny Box. But you learn things that's it. We got here and willfully Johnny Mac for the rest of this year, but so Johnny Mac actually wrote that sermon like 4 or 5 weeks ago. We're supposed to present it, and then the storm came. So, but he did a great job wrapping up that series. And so, if we jump into this next series, let's just talk about life. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it's something sometimes, isn't it? Right? And so what we're gonna do today specifically, but we'll see this. This is more like something I've been studying through and working through, and so we're gonna have a Bible study together, and you can call it preaching if you want, but we're just gonna be talking together about this and some of the stuff we've been working through. And so a flood came, and it affected lots of people. It messed things up. And so Johnny did a great job of last week talking to introduce this question of like, now what? So something happens. So what are you going to do? Now what? What can we do to learn from this? How can we grow from this? Because storms not only come, floods not only come in ways like they did and mess up a building, but also storms and floods come in life. And when those come, how do we grow? How do we learn from them? And then you think about water is this, as I was thinking through this series and we left it in the water and all this, water is this fascinating thing in the sense that it's this powerful force. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes my favorite place to go is the beach and just to sit on the edge of the beach, on the edge of the shore and just to look out into the ocean and just to see how vast it is and how great it is. And sometimes there's this feeling of almost how small you feel in that moment as you look out amongst that water. And water is powerful, Like water is this force that we learn to harness to create electricity. But we also know that water is very destructive. And it can be dangerous and it can be catastrophic. Can you have things like typhoons and things like that and hurricanes? Water is going to go where it's going to go, and there's not much often we can do to stop it. And so we have like water that has like this destructive and catastrophic kind of sense to it. But at the same time, water is life-giving. Like if you don't have water, you die. Water is used to clean things, to purify things, to cleanse things. And so with all of those thoughts and all these ideas that come with this source and this thing that we've been given, and what's fascinating, and we're going to start today, is the Bible is just filled with stories about people on the edge of something. And a lot of times these stories, it includes an element of water. And so we went through a storm that led to a flood. And maybe for some of us, as I've already said, we feel like we're constantly in that mode of waiting for the next storm or the next flood of life to come. And sometimes with those things, there's uncertainty. You know, I mean, a few weeks ago when I was walking through the building and I was, knee deep in this water, I mean, there was a lot of questions that came to mind. There was a lot of uncertainty in that moment. And I was looking and hoping to kind of figure out how we were going to work through this and do all of these things. And that's just the building of water, which is drywall and flooring. But when it comes to the floods of life, when it comes to the storms of life, sometimes we're grasping for anything that will hold us steady. And here's what I've learned in my 43 years is uncertainty will always be a part of the human experience. And going through those seasons and those moments of uncertainty when doubt and fear and all the questions start to pop into mind. And so as we start this series, I want to start with probably the most famous of all time, but at least in the Bible, probably the most famous story that revolves around a storm and water. And that is the story of Noah. Now, I want to make it clear, I am not trying to compare the 2 feet of water that we experienced a couple weeks ago in our building to the story of Noah. These are two very different stories. But here's what I will say. Like Noah's story, for him and his family and the world, there was a disruption. And something happened, and there's these now, as Don said last week, these now what type moments. And here's where I'll tell you guys that I'm learning through everything we're experiencing together. What happened 4 or 5 weeks ago was a disruption. But the other thing that I finally learned in life is not all disruptions are bad. Sometimes disruptions can actually be a good thing. And so in Noah's story, it takes place in Genesis chapter 6, so very early on in the story. And the beginning of the story starts with this. And what's crazy about this story is it's fascinating. We present this story like in kids' church. So if you grew up in church, you probably went to kids' church, or maybe you've had like a Bible story book for your kids. And so the story of Noah is in there. And in the story of Noah, we're going to see Noah kind of builds this boat. And then you see this picture usually, or like there's little characters, like there's like a leg out of Noah boat, and like you have the little rabbits and the little donkeys and the little giraffes all kind of smiling, hopping into the boat. But the reality is, if you know the story of Noah, it's actually a very tragic story. I remember as a kid that they were like, telling us this story, and they were talking about like, and the 2 bunnies got on the boat. And I'm like, but what about the other millions of bunnies that drowned? Like, what about them? Rita, I was a dark kid. So it's like this tragic story. But here's how this story begins. Then the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. If you ever find yourself in a season not thinking that God cares about what's happening, no, God cares. And in this story, we see it open up with the wickedness of humanity had gotten so negative, so violent, so corrupt. And it was like every corner of the earth was touched with it, and it troubled, and some versions even say it broke the heart of God, that he was deeply troubled by what human beings were doing to each other. And the fascinating thing is thousands of years later, we still haven't learned our lessons. And so this tragic story of Noah begins. But in Genesis 6:8, it says this, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And this line, it hits differently when you think about everything that we understand about humanity and what we're capable of. And here's this one guy, Noah. Noah isn't living in a bubble. Noah is living in the culture. Noah is living in the world. He's surrounded by people that are engaged in all of these things. And Noah himself is not a perfect man, but Noah is someone who's trying to walk with God. And even though the world around him feels upside down, he's trying to trust and hold on to something. And so the very beginning of this story is about this one guy who, in the midst of all of this chaos and all of this violence and all of this sinfulness and all of these problems, there's one guy. And he has the faith, we see, the confidence in God to kind of continue this journey. He's trusting in God. Here's what I'm going to say in verse 9. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. And this sounds like a simple idea, but it's actually a radical statement. So walking with God in a culture that's opposite and opposing. Noah did not conform. He didn't compromise. He didn't coast. He walked deliberately, step by step, faithfully with God. And this can be a challenge, not only in his world, but in our world. The idea of letting God set your pace and God set your direction and trusting in his voice. And as far as we talked about before, because we have so many voices, we have so much background noise. We have so many ways in which we're being pulled. And here is an example of one person, one story, one man who continues, in spite of everything else going on around him, to continue to walk faithfully. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, the most talented, or the most put together. You just have to decide to continue and move forward with God. Bob Goff once said this, faith isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting in someone who does. And so Noah is going to be called into this scene. And here's what's fascinating. Here's where I'm going to start with this. Noah doesn't have a 5-year plan, and God doesn't give him one. Noah is not exactly sure what the future is going to be like. He doesn't have a manual for how to navigate what's about to happen. You see, so many of us, I think, in life, we get stuck in these moments when there's seasons of storms or floods, and we get stuck because we don't have clarity. We don't have guarantees. We don't have all the what ifs answered for us, and so we get stuck. But here's what you have to know. God, and I would argue as well, life very rarely works that way, where you have the manual, where you have all of the guarantees, where you have all the what if answered. Usually when we see is God just gives the next step and says, will you trust me? John Ortberg says it this way. Faith is stepping out even when you don't know what's going to happen next. It's trusting the promise more than the plan. And so God calls Noah to this thing, and he tells him, and he's painting a picture of this scene. And sometimes what I want to remind you guys is when you hear these stories, we all know this story. There's movies made about it with Russell Crowe and all kinds of things. And we said learn about it as a kid, but imagine being Noah hearing this. In Genesis, not John, but it's way later. In Genesis 6:14, it says this. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Now leave that up here because here's what you have to know about this statement that's given to Noah. Noah is told to build a three-story cargo-sized ark in the middle of dry land with no ocean in sight and no rain on the radar. One theologian actually said, it is very possible that Noah had never seen a boat. Like he doesn't know. And he's not told to build a rowboat or a little fishing vessel. He's told to build an ark in the middle of the desert. Which seems, let's be honest, a little dumb, right? And so he's told to build this thing, and he's given all of these instructions. And God had imagined this next step that God asked him to. See, we said sometimes faith is going the next step. Like sometimes you get the next step and it's like, oh, that makes sense if this is the next step. This one makes no sense. But Noah doesn't argue. He doesn't delay. He gets to work. Obedience to God doesn't have to make sense, but it does make the difference. Noah didn't need to see the storm to believe. Or to be honest, obedience is really convenient. And here's what I want to say about obedience. Obedience is this word that we don't like, right? But here's the reality. So this week we were driving, pulling down the college in the building, and I hit in the head with the brick, number one. Number two is I inhaled so much dust that probably 100 years old. This might be my last Sunday, so give me a second, okay?
And they have face masks, but I'm a man. I'm not wearing that. Okay.
So Noah didn't see the storm. He didn't even know probably what he's building. So obedience is rarely convenient. It doesn't always make sense. It's usually obedience is about doing something hard, something uncomfortable, something costly. And here's what else we need to know about obedience, in case you've never been told this. Obedience, especially to God, will stretch your time, your reputation, your resources, and often your ego. You gotta remember, Noah is building an ark in the middle of a city in the desert with people watching, looking at him, saying, what is that idiot doing? Friends laughing, strangers whispering, neighbors pointing. But God had called him. And Noah's obedience wasn't half-hearted. He didn't cut corners or delay. Listen to what it says in Genesis 6:22. Noah did everything just as God had commanded him. Everything. Obedience rarely feels natural at first. It can feel risky. This is what Craig Rochelle says about obedience. To step forward, you may have to step away from your security. Obedience means moving in a direction where sometimes the future maybe feels pleasant. Now, here's what you gotta understand. It's one thing to believe in God. We're here because you believe in God, or you want to believe in God, or you're curious about God. It's another thing to believe so enough to obey. Noah obeyed. He didn't just believe, he obeyed fully, faithfully, immediately. Not because he had all the answers, but because he trusted the one giving the instructions. If we're being honest, again, obedience is hard, but here's what's even harder. It's not just being obedient, it's waiting. So sometimes in life, we want to be obedient, but it doesn't happen as quickly as we want. So again, paint the picture. Noah is building this ark out in the middle of the city, in the middle of the desert. No rain in sight, no oceans in sight. And he's building this, and here's what you have to know. It takes him 50 to 75 years. Ladies, the guys have a husband that started a project. 50 to 75 years of this man's life building the ark with no storms, no oceans rising in the deserts. And then where Noah finds himself. 50 to 75 years waiting. And so he continues to be obedient. He continues to build the ark. And in Genesis 7:10, it finally starts to rain. And so Noah gathers his family. He gathers all the animals and he goes into the ark. And then listen to this. He's in the ark after 50 to 75 years, which is a long time. And he has to wait another 7 days. 7 more days, and then it finally starts to rain. And here's what I got to imagine. If you're Noah, and maybe this relates to your life, like you're waiting, there becomes this voice that kind of says, did I mishear? I mean, is this actually what God called me to? Is this actually what God, or maybe it's this voice. Did I just waste all that time? Did I just do all of this for nothing? Maybe you felt that feeling. You stepped out on faith. You gave generously. You started something new. And then there's that silence. Nothing's moving and the doubts get louder, even louder than the critics already criticizing the craziness of what you're doing. But you often have to remember God's promises are not bound by yours or my timelines. And the gap between obedience and fulfillment is where faith is forged. Somebody told me this a long time ago. Waiting seasons, because we all hate to wait, but waiting seasons are not wasted seasons. We think that they are, but they're not. Noah had to learn to trust not in what he could see, but what in God had said. And this is the postures that we're called to as well. The posture of even in the delays, even in the silence, even in the unknown, even in the waiting, not to give up on the promises of God. So 50 to 70 years, building the ark, and then it starts to rain. The skies crack, the rains begin to fall and fall and fall. And one question, maybe you've posed this, is who shuts the door? Well, Genesis tells us. Genesis 7:16 says this, then the Lord shut him in. God shut Noah and his family in the ark. Noah didn't just tell God to build the ark, he sealed him inside of it. And for 40 days and 40 nights, the rain doesn't stop. The world is submerged. The familiar disappears. The future is hidden beneath the flood waters. And the only place left untouched is inside the ark. Now, we often stop there at that story, and then we think, 40 days, 40 nights, the rain. But here's something that stuck out to me, and I was like reading through this story, preparing for this. So Noah builds this ark. There's no sails. There's no rudders. So there's no way for him to steer it or control it. And so they're in this ark and there's a massive storm going on outside. And so see what happens is we've been obedient. We've done what God says. And then here's what speaks out to me. Noah still had to go through the storm. Noah had obeyed and trusted, followed the instructions, and he still had to go through the storm anyway. Sometimes we believe that if we do all the right things, life will stay calm, but faith doesn't give us a storm-free life. So maybe you're in a storm right now. Maybe you feel like I've been obedient and I've had faith and I've done the right things, but the winds are howling, the waves are high. It feels like everything is coming apart. So Noah and his family, they're in the animals, they're in this ark. Just because you're in the storm doesn't mean that God has abandoned you. Listen to what Isaiah 43 says. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. God never promised to keep you out of the flood. He promised to carry you through it. Noah wasn't spared from the experience of having to go through the flood. The world beneath him is drowning, and he doesn't know how long it will last or where he will land. The skies were dark, the noise was deafening, the ark creaked and groaned. And yet through all of that, Noah was saved. Sometimes storms are disorienting. You lose sight, direction. You ever been on a storm in the middle of like the ocean or a storm on the lake? You lose control. You don't know what's next. And sometimes life feels like that. Listen to what Lisa Bevery says. Peace isn't the absence of storms. Peace is found in the presence of God, even in the middle of the storm. So for 40 days and 40 nights, Noah is just thrown to and fro in this giant ark that he built. But he had to trust that God and started the journey would guide that boat to completion. And maybe you're there right now in life, afloat, unsure, unable to control where the season is taking you. And listen, you're not alone in that. Many of us have gone through that or are going through it. But more importantly, you're not alone because it's something that all of us will experience. But you're not alone because God did not bring you this far to leave you adrift, just like he didn't bring Noah this far. He's still in control. He's still speaking. Our hope is that of Noah's, that even though the storm is raging, that we can take heart if the story isn't over, that eventually the rain will start, the clouds will part, the waves will proceed. And after 40 days and 40 nights, that's exactly what happens in Westboy. So it ends, and their ark finally comes to rest on this mountain. And as Noah and his family, they leave the ark. After no unpacking, no celebrating, no rebuilding. This is what happens. This is one of the first things they do. Listen to what it says in Genesis 8:20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. And I love this line because the very first thing that Noah did when he stepped on the dry ground after the greatest upheaval in history was to build a place of worship. Noah didn't rush to start a new life, to construct a new house. He knew that anything he'd known before. He decided to worship. Worship wasn't an afterthought. It was his priority. And I think that gets lost on us sometimes. It's to be able to go through that storm, to go through that moment, and to have that moment where you finally feel a little bit secure, and to remember to thank God and to worship. The flood was over, the earth was quiet, the sky was clear, and so they worship. Okay, so we have someone that's called to this crazy thing, and he's obedient. He has the faith to go through that. He has the faith to wait through all of that. He goes through the storm. He goes through all of those things. He has this moment where it starts to feel like it's finally going to be over and it's going to make sense. And he steps out of the ark. He builds a place of worship. But here's the thing, and this is what stuck to me about this story. When Noah stepped off the ark, he's in a brand new world. Nothing looked familiar. There were no cities, no neighbors, no routines, no normal. The world that he had known was gone. And this is where faith steps in again. Faith doesn't just help us survive the storm. It empowers us to move forward after it. Noah could have frozen. You ever been through something that's disorienting and you come out on the other side and you don't even know what to do next? This is the moment that Noah feels. But listen to what Genesis 9:1 tells us. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. Here's what he's saying. Hey, Noah, I know you've been through a lot. We got some work to do. And Noah believed him. And this is what is important to me about this story is that God not only guides him through all of those things, but in the end, we hear God saying to him, let's go. It's that now what moment. Gee, many of us still stuck in the aftermath of our floods. The storm has passed, but we're still standing there afraid or not knowing what to do next. And that again is where God is already there waiting for us. God is ready to bring us through something. He walks with us into something new. It's this understanding that even though we've been through all of this, that there's something new for us to step into. And yeah, it was painful, whatever you went through. See, I don't want to talk about just water entering a church building anymore, okay? Talking about the real stuff in life, the stuff that you and I had gone through. And this is orienting and it's jarring and it's all of these things. And now we've come through it. And so what happens next? I love what Annie F. Downs says. God doesn't waste your pain. He uses it to prepare you for purpose. And so Noah and his family, they step out of the ark, they worship, but they're stepping into what's next. The flood was real. The loss was painful, but they've come out on the other side different, as is the world around them. And sometimes it takes courage to move forward. It takes faith to walk into a future you can't see. But just as God has brought them all the way to this point, there's this belief that God is bringing them into the next thing. So here's the question for us as we work through this story. For you, what's your next step? What part of this story do you find yourself in? Do you find yourself in the story where you've been at this point where you've been called to something and it seems crazy? It seems about as crazy as building an ark in the middle of the desert. Or maybe it's the part of the story where you feel like you're stepping in obedience, but you're being mocked for it. Or maybe you find yourself in this season where you stepped into obedience. You said, God, okay, I saw as crazy as I thought. Let's go into this. But now you're in the season of waiting? Or are you in that season where you're on the boat, you see the storm around you, but you still have to go through it? Or maybe if you're on the other side of it and you're not sure just exactly what's next. By the end of Noah's story, we've seen a journey marked by radical obedience, unwavering trust, persistent faith, and unshakable belief in the promise of God. From walking with God in the corrupt world to building a boat in the desert, from waiting in silence and surviving the storm to worshiping on dry land and now stepping into the unknown. So what do we learn from all this? What did I learn from all this? That it's possible to trust God even when life is uncertain. Noah didn't quit. He didn't crumble. He didn't coast. He built. He built when it didn't make sense. He built when others mocked him. He built when it took years without progress. And he built because he believed. See, what you have to learn by our journey here at Journey, but your journey is that it's gritty sometimes. It's one board, one nail, one step at a time. But just like Noah, if we have the faith to be obedient and to trust in God, you can keep going. Not because we understand everything, but because you know God is faithful. So what does that look like? Maybe it looks like you continue to pray even when the answers haven't come. Maybe it's showing up when no one else does. Maybe it's leading with integrity even when it seems like others are willing to cut corners. Maybe it's loving people who are hard to love. Maybe it's giving when it stretches you, and maybe it's trusting when results aren't visible yet. We don't always need flashy faith. We need faith like Noah. No faith that follows through. And whatever it is, it keeps building and it keeps going. It keeps believing. It keeps holding on to hope. Years later, there's a writer that's going to write this book. And it's going to be called the Book of Hebrews. And Hebrews is this amazing book. If you've never read, you should read the Bibles, by the way. It's this amazing book. And Hebrews chapter 11 is referred to as like the faith chapter. Now, what's amazing to me about this faith chapter is none of the people that are in that chapter was their goal one day to be in these stories and in these accounts and in these things. But in the middle of all this, we see the story of Noah thousands of years later pop up about a man who was called in this journey, who walked through these things that seemed almost insane at the time. But listen to what Hebrews 11 says. It was by faith that Noah heard God's warnings about things he could not yet see. He obeyed God and built a large boat to save his family. By his faith, Noah showed that the world was wrong, and he became one of those who were made right with God through faith. And so whatever part of the journey you're on, what's next? What's your now what? And as we collectively as a church move forward together, believing that God is going to give us the next right step, even though we don't see the 5-year plan or any of those things, believing and trusting and being obedient to what God has called us to. May that be our journey, and may that be your journey as you walk through life. And you leave behind in the water, your doubt, your fear, and you step forward in confidence, obedience, and the promises of God. Let's pray. Father God, we love you and we thank you. God, we thank you for the story. We think of it as like a kid's story. But there's so much to unpack in this story of this man that lived all those years ago. Something that hopefully all of us, depending on no matter what part of our story we find ourselves in, need to relate to. And God, my prayer is that whatever season of life, whatever storm we either come out of, we're about to go into, we're waiting on, God, that we know that you're there with us, you're walking beside us, you're guiding us. And God, my prayer is that we have hearts that are willing to be obedient to what you're calling us to. God, I know that word, it's triggering. It's not always popular, but obedient, to take that next step with faith, to continue to follow along, even when it doesn't always make sense, not only to us, but maybe the world around us. God, maybe for some of us, it's the part of that story where we've done what we think are the right things. And just like Noah, we're on the ark, but we're still going through the storm. God, give us the faith that we need, the wisdom we need, the strength that we need to keep going. God, maybe some of us, it's that we've come out on the other side. And there's this orienting feeling of what's next. You've gone through the hard thing, but what's next? What's next? God, give us the steps we need, the wisdom, the strength, the people, whatever it is to surround us, to encompass us through your spirit to guide us. And Father, in all of it, may we never forget, as Noah never forgotten, the promises that you give us, that you will not leave us, you will not forsake us, you will not abandon us. God, it's the promise of your mercies every day, your love, your grace. God, may we never forget all of this. So Father, we love you. Can we thank you? In the Son's name you pray. Amen.